So I've already made the list of the top 20 Xbox One backwards compatible games, but let's now go further back in time and do a top 10 Xbox 360 games every gamer should check out via backwards compatibility, with some which you may have missed or forgotten about. Of course, there are many great games I've had to leave off, but these are all excellent, and I decided to include some fantastic but perhaps lesser known titles as well. A great selection of top-notch games from such a fantastic generation of gaming. Of course, if you like the video, then like, share or comment, but now let's get to the list. Let's kick it off by checking out one of gaming's greatest collections at number 10, and it's the Orange Box. Included in this is the classic Half-Life 2 and its expansions, but it also includes Team Fortress 2 and Portal, a collection where each game is a classic. Focusing on Half-Life 2 after revisiting it recently, this was a game which pushed first-person shooters forward into a new direction and which started with the original Half-Life in 1998. From the moment we begin the game and return as Gordon Freeman, we are introduced to the mysterious G-Man, City 17 and the Combine, as we try and unravel what is happening in Half-Life 2's vague but intriguing storytelling. We get to play around with original weaponry such as the gravity gun, as we throw barrels around for example, and see the advanced physics engine of the day at work. Facial animations were also of such a high quality for the time as well, but then you also had the lengthy campaign, plus the expansions, and great side characters such as Alex Vance, and Half-Life 2 was a classic as soon as it hit store shelves. It may have pushed the Xbox 360 to its limits, with many dropped frames and regular loading screens at certain points during gameplay, but really, do yourself a favour and check out why it's considered such a classic. It can show its age at times, but you'll be playing through gaming history. Next on the list at number 9 we have Enslaved Odyssey to the West. Coming from developer Ninja Theory, I remember buying this as it was cheap at the time, and very glad I did, as this action-adventure game had a great premise, interesting story, and two characters and their relationship which just kept me invested from beginning to end. Graphically, it still looks impressive for a much older game, but animations are a little simple and lack some flow when compared to more modern games, but don't let that stop you. Enslaved packs enough fun and heart in it that playing it again all these years later hasn't dampened my enjoyment of it at all. Sometimes revisiting older games isn't such a good idea, but with Enslaved, it's still so damn good. Although the game wasn't a huge success upon release and mostly underperformed sales wise, hopefully we receive a sequel at some point, as letting this franchise lay dormant is a loss for gaming. Coming in next at number 8, we have Spec Ops: The Line. Now none of this footage is mine, as recording from the Xbox for this game isn't possible, but just know that this is another underrated gem which has gotten some more attention as the years have passed and people become more aware of it. I was hooked playing this for the first time, and even though it has some decent third-person controls and lots of enemies to take down, what raises this game up is the surprisingly excellent and well-written story and cast of characters. Really, stories this good don't turn up in shooters all that often. Players travel to Dubai and navigate through the sandstorms and enemies as we try and work out what has happened here, but from the moment the game starts and all the way through, the narrative just gets better and better, with a few pivotal scenes which will stick with you for a long time to come, and which definitely contributes to putting this game on this list. Don't let its age put you off playing it when and if you have such powerful new hardware that can play the latest games. Spec Ops: The Line can compete with those and then some. It's a must play. At number 7, we have Deus Ex Human Revolution, a series which has been around for a couple of decades now and has had several console outings, but I've always thought that it's somewhat underrated and looked over by many gamers out there. Sure, we have the newer entrant in the series in Deus Ex Mankind Divided on Xbox One and PS4, but it's Human Revolution which stands above it in terms of setting, story, characters, and gameplay, even though of course it isn't as graphically impressive. Set in the year 2027 amongst a world full of conspiracies and corporations, players can augment their character in order to facilitate certain styles of play. Be it more stealth-like or more heavy-handed, Deus Ex Human Revolution gives enough freedom and diversity within its locations and gameplay options that it can easily be played multiple times before you have experienced everything the game has to offer. With its stylized visuals and aesthetic coupled with the sometimes minimalist but extremely memorable score, everything comes together to create this amazing sci-fi cyberpunk world. If you like stealth games or even third-person action games at all, then you owe it to yourself to check out this long-running and engrossing franchise. Coming in at number 6, we have the second game in the Gears of War franchise, and it was this one that took everything that worked in the first game and just injected it with more variety in levels and gameplay, and with better story moments which tried to give these characters a human side. As it succeeded, Gears of War 2 was everything that a sequel should be. With slightly improved visuals as well, it was really the introduction of new weapons, more elaborate set pieces, plus the addition of vehicles and being able to ride a Brumac. Gears of War 2 left behind the mostly brown and similar environments of the first game and just improved upon everything. This progression of the series would continue in the third game as well, but the sequel was when the franchise really hit its stride. If it interests you, definitely start with the first game, as there's a lot of fun to be had, but the second game just delivered in every area a sequel should. Okay, moving on to number 5, but this one is going to include a series which is still going today, and that's Assassin's Creed. I'll be upfront in saying that my favorite Assassin's Creed game or games is the Ezio Trilogy. So Assassin's Creed 2 followed by Brotherhood and Revelations, but I included Assassin's Creed Odyssey in my top Xbox One list, but I also wanted to remember the very first Assassin's Creed game which kicked everything off. Of course, it also includes the Animus sections where you play as Desmond that most people don't like at all, but it also did a lot of things right. Altair is still an excellent protagonist, even if he isn't very deep or doesn't say much, but the areas of Jerusalem, Acre and Damascus still hold up today, and the story of the Assassins and Templars and the setting being the Third Crusade is just fantastic. Who could forget climbing the buildings, sinking and jumping off in the haystacks at the time? And even though we know it all too well now from other games in the future, it was still special. The Ezio Trilogy improved upon the original, with the trilogy kicking off in Florence and with a number of fantastic side characters such as Leonardo da Vinci wound into the plot. It got rid of some of the repetitiveness of the original and gave players more things to do and see. This footage on screen is of the remaster, but the originals still hold up today. For nothing else, return to an Assassin's Creed game before it became these huge open worlds with RPG mechanics. Both are great, but these older titles are well worth revisiting. At number 4, we have Remedy's Alan Wake, which is still excellent and holds up today for the most part. Really, the weakest part of playing Alan Wake is the gameplay, with nothing more than standard shooting mechanics and having to constantly use the flashlight to combat enemies, plus also needing to change those damn batteries in the thing so damn often. You take control of Alan Wake himself, a writer with writer's block, who takes a trip with his wife to Bright Falls, Washington, but it doesn't take long for strange things to start to happen, starting with his wife Alice being dragged into the lake by an unknown force. Things only become more strange with Alan receiving phone calls from the supposed kidnapper, finding pages of his book laying around the environment, and trying to piece everything together in this psychological horror game. The setting, the puzzling story, the voiceovers, the characters, and how everything plays out is why so many gamers, including myself, are simply waiting for Remedy to revisit Alan Wake and give us a sequel it deserves. Still graphically impressive in parts too, but head into this game wanting to play through its story first and foremost. It was fantastic at the time, and age hasn't taken away any of its greatness. Play this game. Continuing with the horror theme at number 3, and it's the gruesomely awesome Dead Space. This game is one that absolutely nails the atmosphere along with basically everything else, and it all combines to be a classic horror game for those who want that, or an action-packed ride for gamers who want that, or just a very well told narrative set on board the Ishimura spacecraft. Nothing more needs to be said about the story or what happens, even at the beginning, as it's just better playing the game yourself. The silent protagonist really works in this game, as does the rest of the sounds, whether it's the burst of gunfire as you blow off the limbs of the grotesque enemies, the sounds of you entering a vacuum, the sounds of other characters pushing the story forward via video call, or how I could hear very faint whispers at times when playing with my headphones on, which I completely missed the first time around. With a very minimalist HUD, which is a fantastic decision, to being able to buy ammo and improve your suit, Dead Space is still a classic today. It may not have received the highest scores at the time, but I still see people speaking of it, and for good reason. It's fun, it's tense, it can be challenging, and its setting is still memorable all these years later. What a game. At number 2, we have Rockstar's Red Dead Redemption. the birth of its other open world series, and what a way to kick it off. Sure, there was Red Dead Revolver as well, but this is where the series really came into its own. Following John Marston, who is no longer an outlaw, he's taken by Bureau of Investigation agents and his wife and child held captive by the government and told to hunt down his former gang members. Set in 1911 on the American frontier, players are greeted with one of the most realised open worlds in gaming at the time, and which would only be improved upon in its gorgeous 2018 sequel. There was something special about just riding around these vast open world environments filled with nature, which is in stark contrast to Rockstar's Grand Theft Auto series. From its colourful cast of characters and its dozens of missions over its lengthy campaign, Red Dead Redemption was the beginning of another franchise, and which ended in such a way which made everything before it have meaning, but also set up anything which would come after. For a 10-year-old game, it still looks and runs well, but doesn't compare of course to games of today, including its sequel. But it was one huge reason as to why the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3 generation was so loved and could deliver experiences which just weren't possible on the systems that had come before. This is highly recommended. Now we land at number 1, and it's the Mass Effect Trilogy. This series was easily going to take the top spot. In the words of many other YouTubers today, if you want my brutally honest review, then this is head and shoulders above anything else on this list. Let's start with Mass Effect 1, which has performance issues, gunplay which is decent at best, and with some open world exploration which is forgettable, considering most of the planets consist of, well, nothing. In contrast to that, we have some of the best characters to ever grace a video game series, and I think the same of the story too. From Shepard and Garrus to the villains of Saren and Sovereign, learning about the Mass Effect relays and the Citadel. So much character development and story is crammed into this game throughout the whole single player campaign. That is extraordinary. Plus adding a fulfilling and a never to be forgotten ending. If there were no sequels, then this would still be a classic. Mass Effect 2 got rid of the filler, improved the graphics and performance, and introduced even more memorable characters such as the elusive man and Thane, and such great locations. With one of the best openings to any game, Mass Effect 2 took the series into classic status, and both were already two of my favourite games of all time. Mass Effect 3, in my opinion, continued the series' greatness and finished off this amazing trilogy. For fans of these games, we will always talk about them and what they mean to us. Talk about their best moments and what we remember the most. This series takes out number 1 on this list, but again, to be brutally honest, it has a huge chance to take out number 1 on my list of the greatest games of all time, or series. If there was ever a must-play game or trilogy, for those who enjoy single-player games or RPGs, then this is it. BioWare at their absolute best. A classic, play it now. So there's my top 10 backwards compatible Xbox 360 games that people should play. Which games would you include on the list? And which would be your number 1? Obviously I left off several games which could have made the list, but really, the Xbox 360 was a part of one of the greatest generations of games, and through backwards compatibility, we can keep playing them on new hardware. What a time to be a gamer. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.